Welcome, folks, to the Aries working group call on the 31st of July, 2024. This is a Hyperledger call, so the antitrust policy and the code of conduct are in effect. The link to the agenda can be found in the chat. Hyperledger wiki in the regular spots, and that didn't copy and paste right. What's going on here? So there's the link. Welcome to make any changes, adjustments useful to the community, or add yourself to the attendees list, which you're welcome to do. Are there any new folks or announcements today? We're not quite far enough along to put IW on the announcements list. That seems like it's our most persistent announcement throughout the year, but not quite yet. Any release status or work updates folks want to share with our group here today?
Occupy 1.0 is very nearly there. We have one last issue we're wrestling over, and that is, do we take out of the default image artifacts BBS signatures, because we cannot get a BBS signatures that supports multi-architecture. And so do we make it easier for developers who are on ARM, M1, and later Apple platforms, so that they can right out of the box run the Docker things locally and run everything locally? Or do we leave BBS in there and make the developer experience a little bit worse? So that's what we're wrestling with. We have a PR in, we're just trying to figure out the ramifications of it, and whether it's a 1.0 or a 1.101 or what. So, but other than that, everything else, all the testing, the checkout. We also did 2 patch releases to deal with security vulnerability in Occupy for 11.x line and the 0.11x line. So it's 0.11.2 has been released, and 0.12.2 is pending release. We've got, again, a release candidate that's been checked out. We're just trying to finalize it and send out the final version of 0.12.2 for that vulnerability. And the 0.12.2 has a bunch of other cleanup fixes that are helpful, non-breaking changes that are helpful for implementations. That's where we are with Occupy.
I love updates there. Thank you, Stephen. Any other updates?
Aries VCX 0.65.0 got released. That was like 2 or so-ish weeks ago. Primarily updates to adding support for Data Exchange 1.1, as well as DPIR 4. As part of that, also resolved a number of interoperability issues during Data Exchange with Occupy. We also updated our, I think this was mentioned by Stephen previously, but we've updated the Aries VCX Aries Agent Test Harness back channel, so that is now up to date and is also continuously deployed. So we'll be able to have that stay current with the code base. So lots of good work happening there.
Very awesome. Thank you for that update. Any other updates before we jump into the regular agenda items? All right, we have a couple things. The first up is the quarterly report prepared by Mr. Stephen Curran that needs some review and additions. That's due soon. And then as far as our continued charter review discussion from last week, I have applied some things, and I have just a little bit more thought on how to do this. I should probably jump into edit mode, so this is easier to manage. So that's on the agenda. I would also love to get into our community coordinated updates and qualified DIDs and out of band invitations and DID exchange for any updates that we have there. It's been a minute since we have checked in. Any adjustments to the agenda, new topics, changing order, removals, stuff that we want to modify on the agenda before we get started. Right. So first up on the list is the quarterly report that is linked here in the agenda. This has been prepped by our own Stephen Curran. And this is the Q3. Q3 makes it sound like it encompasses Q3, but the report here for 2024 with the project health, etc. And the thing that I will note out of here is that we have, let's see, where are we? So there's note on the upcoming stuff that has been happening, and then this is the Hyperledger. We measure commits and contributors and organizations. And there's a note here that there's not a good way for us to control the list of included repositories. So those still include the repositories that have moved from Hyperledger to the Open Wall Foundation. Those repositories were moved instead of cloned. That's good because it preserves all the commit history and all the other stuff as part of the projects. But there's this weird side effect that it sort of the tool has retained the number of repositories that have moved to the Open Wall Foundation. So it's still there. They're still peripheral, but that's to be aware of. And then work on Aries VCX as reported by James as well. This James could probably use a little bit of a tuned update. Yeah.
Sam, could you hit refresh? There's a yeah.
I wrote that all
There,
up
look
in
at-
that one as you were talking, Sam. It's there.
Look
Oh
at
my
that.
gosh. Wow. I should talk long more often. That's fantastic. I talk and other people actually do stuff. That's fantastic. So, no, cool. Okay, well, never mind, James. We thank James for his addition on Aries VCX. That's kind of awesome. To highlight this stuff, that's pretty awesome. And then Akapai updates as well, and then current plans, which is pretty great. I didn't know, Stephen, if you wanted to mention the community coordinated update stuff here, or if that was just something that was more internal as part of that.
Yeah. Do you want to send me a sentence or two to write on that, and I'll just throw it in? That would be awesome.
Sure. I'm not going to do it while I'm talking, though. I feel like I have a bar set that I just can't match.
Yeah, really.
James, I recall earlier you just saying that you were happy you could say intelligent things at this time in the morning, and you just did more than say intelligent things. Anyway, so cool. So anyways, this quarterly update report is here. And so any updates you wanna make to this are good, and that can be included in the update to the Hyperledger. This goes to the TOC, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Technical Oversight Committee. That's what the O is for.
Yeah.
As part of Hyperledger. So yes. Also, given the timeline, Stephen, it just occurred to me that this might be the last one.
I don't know. I still don't understand what's happening with the LFTT change. But
Well, there's
there
certainly
will
some
continue to
implications.
be the need for annual reports and quarterly reports. So I don't think it's the last one.
Okay, so they're going to continue that, although it may adjust.
I
a
think
little.
so, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Any
It's
thoughts,
more
questions,
depends
comments?
on, yeah, more depends on what the project decides to do versus what In other words, do they not want to report them and have another place to report them? They still have to have them, but they could report them to a different place,
Hmm,
like to the project themselves.
right. I think it's cool. I think having the review, for example, of contributions just out of the dashboard, the activity dashboard that Hyperledger
Mhm.
has is really cool. It's neat to see for a time period kind of how that lines up, and we're posting impressive numbers. That's really cool.
I
Um,
really maybe it's right, but I did notice the list of repositories included seems to be ridiculous. So I'm a little
are we
concerned. On
over
the other
including
hand,
repositories or?
yeah, like they've got a bunch of Hyperledger Labs ones in there, and I have no idea where they came from. Um, so it is possible, but having said that, there has been an absolute ton of stuff going on in all three of the frameworks.
Right.
Assuming that Credo is still in there, um, there's been a ton of stuff happening in Akapai and VCX and Credo and Ascar and so on. So I wouldn't be shocked, but it still seems really high. It still may be suspect.
Over included. Well, some of those labs things too can end up with just a high number of commits and stuff going on just at the early side of a
Yeah,
project, right?
yeah,
So okay, so a little bit of caution there about the tool, and of course
yeah.
this is linked to the
I'm
dashboard itself.
totally less impressed with LFDTX or LFX Insight these days.
Yeah. So, but anyway, still it's a celebration of all that we've got going on, which is significant. And that shows up here in some of the descriptions of things being happening here. So so that's very cool. Any other comments, questions, thoughts on the quarterly report? Stephen, I've got a note here to add the community coordinated update notes to it as well.
Okay, thank you. Good.
I will not be as fast as James. I feel like I got to say that the next couple times I do anything. Thanks, James, for your awesomeness. Okay.
Anytime.
Yeah. Um, okay, so charter review. We had some really cool discussions. And then we actually like wordsmithed a handful of these things, and then someone threw it into Chat GPT, and this needed a little bit of adjustment. But what I have done is I've gotten some suggestions made. So let's see if I open this up. Um, let me switch the account that's on real quick. That didn't work. Do I have to do it here? Okay, I think I've got that done correctly. So this, I have added in suggest mode. The largest thing that we had discussed changing was the mission and scope of the project. So here's mission and here's scope. The scope depends upon the mission. And so that's what is here. You know, this is a really light thing that is a little bit overly focused on verifiable credentials. And so we have that in here too. I also in several places pulled Hyperledger out of the name. Um, and so that's here, and that's came from our discussion previously. The other change that I made here is under the technical steering committee, and it kind of indicates that any meetings of the technical steering committee are intended to be open to the public, may be conducted, blah, blah, blah. I mentioned the meetings may occur as part of regular scheduled community calls instead of dedicated calls when the volume of TSC related topics can be easily accommodated without additional meetings. Just kind of highlighting the discussion that we had that we probably don't need additional infrastructure and meetings to pull this off. We can just have that there. There's still a remaining open question about the mechanism of designating maintainers, given the discussion that we had. Notes are kind of roughly down here, where there is a maintainers file, but the current stuff is actually being maintained in this access control YAML file. And so this is written as such that it depends on the stuff within our own project. Though we have more than one project, which means or more than one repository, which means that we had talked about relying this onto like the main or perhaps the Aries RFC repo. And so we would designate that repository itself and the associated maintainers file would actually be the one that we talked about. And then in that maintainers file would be representative of the TSC within the project. And so and that way you could always tell who is on the TSC. If anything came to voting, which is yet to happen in our community, but if it did, then that would be the list of people whose votes counted. We anticipate doing those in a regular meeting and everything else. The other thing that occurred to me was that just for good sort of hygiene, we would want to indicate that and it may already be in here, but any like official action that needs to happen or that it happens needs to be well communicated in addition to the meetings to the TSC. So emails or other contact with folks in the TSC to notify them of some pending action that they want to take. Mostly because you just want to make sure that so that would probably be underneath here for making that happen. So, because this talks about the quorum that is present for anyone taking a vote, but I think we need to set some basis of communication for the TSC voting. That way, anyone that happens to be on the TSC but cannot regularly attend these meetings doesn't get taken by surprise as part of that. And so I think there ought to be some addition there just to make that happen.
Hey, Sam,
Yeah.
could I borrow the screen for just a second? Or actually, probably not that important now that I think about it, but I will anyway. I set a couple of things up. So one of the things I proposed, we had the Indy meeting yesterday and went over the charter and the same thing. And one of the things that I proposed here is that we pick a team. In this case, we pick the Indy admin team from the YAML file and say that is the TSC, and we update it based on pull requests to that file to adjust the membership of the TSC. And maybe that's a way we could be more precise about who is on the TSC. We could say the TSC members are the maintainers, and the maintainers are listed on this team. That might be a better way to say it. But
Well,
we pick
the thing I
a
don't
team.
love about that is that we can make a PR, but we don't actually have commit rights to that repository as a project.
Access control.yaml. As a matter of policy, we control it. They do what Rye does what is told. The staff who does have control over it has to agree to has to follow through with the wishes of the organization. I don't think
Yes,
that's a question.
it's sort of just one step removed in the sense that the
Yeah.
people in the project are not the people that they can open the PR and comment on stuff. But my
Yes.
only reservation there is that that feels like now we have to get some external party to do something to acknowledge that. And maybe that's good.
So the one other way to do it is we could have a tsc.md file, and the TSC has members have no GitHub powers, because the way to get GitHub powers is through this. There's no way we can change that. We could have a file that says the TSC members are the following, and they don't automatically get any GitHub powers. And then via this, they would logically get. We could do that, but where would that file reside? Which repo and so on? I guess the Aries repo.
I think the Aries repo is pretty straightforward. In Indy, you have to just pick one and designate that the TSC file within that is what makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the
I
Aries repo, nobody touches. I don't know when the last update was made to the Aries repo, but that could be used.
I think it could be used, and I don't know that it matters that there's a lot of traffic on the repo in question.
No,
I,
no, it just needs to point to a single file. So you're thinking a single file called tsc.md that it implies no actual, nothing other than the person is a member of the TSC. Likely they would be a team member and have some controls, but they don't automatically get it by being in the TSC. That's a separate process. That's okay.
I think so. The thing I
Okay.
like about that is that we as a organization can, decide, and there's going to be a lot of overlap between maintainers and TSC, but I think that and
Absolutely.
I don't mind that I don't mind the team thing, but it just feels weird to say, okay, this repository maintained by people that are not us has the commit rights to adjust who's in the TSC.
Well, that's a given. There's no way you can change that because, I mean, if if Aries moves out and has its own organization, then it would have its own file. But as long as it is in an umbrella organization like Hyperledger or LFDT, it requires having this access control file over it.
Is that a
And
GitHub
ultimately,
mechanism, or is that a mechanism
I
that's been
believe it's
created
a
by
GitHub
Hyperledger?
I believe it's a GitHub mechanism that they're taking advantage of. It is to make um, team membership manageable. So
Right.
team
Yeah, yeah,
membership as control, permissions as control, as as code, if you will.
sure. And that makes tons of sense. But I think that using the repository access for the management of the TSC itself is the one leap that might be too far. That's what I'm talking about. The other really useful
But you
thing,
realize that, but you realize that like commit rights or anything else can't be there except in here.
yes. But right now, there is a maintainers file, which sort of implies that it is. And in the maintainers file, probably ought to be adjusted to say you can't change the maintainers here. It has to be changed over there. Because right now, there's kind of two
Yeah,
places where stuff is
absolutely. That's
stated,
what
and
I'm
it's not.
saying. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get through at the TOC level, at the Hyperledger TOC level, is what we say and all this talk reference to maintainers files is wrong. It's
Yes.
factually wrong, and that information needs to get fixed.
So,
So that is one of my rants. So the second one is how we define TSC, and I'm okay with defining TOC as being a tsc.md file in one repo owned by the project. It's just that it doesn't, it's disconnected from GitHub rights, which may be a good thing.
um, yes, the other thing I like about the TSC and the maintainers, though, where I acknowledge that we're not using that, is that um, the um, is that the it contains text in addition to, so just to like
Yes,
um oh, I
I know
just
what you're
did the
going to
wrong
say,
thing.
like the rules for who can be a maintainer and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I like that a
Yeah,
lot because here's the
yes,
of course the list of maintainers, and we've already recognized the need to sort of make this current, but
right,
it actually has the process of doing these. And so
yes,
from a charter perspective, what I kind of like saying is here's the rules that are actually in the charter, and those are hard to change on purpose by design. And then you point to the file and you say the TSA has can add or clarify rules as necessary in this file, and that way that you don't have to actually go mess with the charter in order to sort of do smaller
right,
things
yeah,
of less importance but useful to have documented. Um, and so a
yeah,
tsc.md file, I think in a repo, I think would actually is a good idea and is an improvement
yeah.
over trying to figure out what's going on with maintainers or in the access control YAML or whatever else.
Okay. what I will do is put that into what I'm trying to get to is at tomorrow's TOC to talk about this in a coherent way. I'm going to use this as an example. So I'm going to update the wording in there.
Okay.
Put tsc.md file in the Aries repo.
Yeah.
So that we have a very precise, it's not just in the repo because that means nothing because there's 222 repos. Yeah,
Hey, you know, the other thing that we could use, um, I'm just going to copy this for the thing.
yeah,
The other
yeah.
thing that we could use is a little bit of clarification on what happens to the Hyperledger organization within GitHub. Does that rename to
See,
the
this
decentralized
goes back
trust?
to, yeah, so just so you know, it likely, actually, it's really hard to tell because it depends on what each project wants to do. If you want to retain, so Hyperledger as a GitHub organization will remain, and I'm sure that things like Indy and Fabric and Iroha will retain that because they're truly ledgers. Um, then it's open season for everyone else. Aries could have its own organization. It could be LFDT Aries, and I'm sure LFDT will have its own organization, and Aries could just be part of that. You know, it all goes all over the place. Whatever organization you're in will have its own source control.yaml file, and that will dictate all the teams and so on. So all of that is kind of up in the air, as in projects can choose to do whatever the hell they want. And as long as they meet the branding and trademark checks, um, they can do whatever they want. That's the message I've got from the TOC.
Right. Yeah.
Fun.
So cool. I appreciate some clarifications there, and I like this. I like the tsc.md
Okay.
file that we can use. I think that's a decent strategy for pulling that off.
And then the last part, just to clarify, is that I'm pushing that somebody, and if I had more time, I would do it, will create a GitHub action that will process the um, process the source control.yaml and generate a per repository file that says, here's the list of people with escalated GitHub rights. Here's here's the name, the GitHub or at least the GitHub ID and the right they have within each repo, and then the maintainer's file within every repo will point to that generated file so that
So that
you,
that's the current list, but it's like a read replica of
yeah,
the stuff
it's
done
a
elsewhere.
GitHub action tied to every merge done on the access control file so that it's always up to date. And then the maintainer's file has just a pointer for the list of people, and then everything else is all the policies for per repository of what you want.
That totally makes
And
sense.
actually, and now that I think about it, I think that it actually ought to have just the maintainer's file in every repo should just be two pointers, one to the list of people and one to the policies, which points to the Aries maintainers file, so that we're not replicating the policies in every repository either.
Yeah, we certainly could.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to make that. Thank you for letting me.
But from their perspective, all they need to do is generate the one file in each repo. We
Exactly.
can just
Their
update the
perspective.
maintainer's file to point to the
Exactly.
other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it then reflects reality. Thanks for letting me go through that in my head and explain it, because that's what I'm going to present to the TOC tomorrow.
Super useful.
Cool.
So as far as actual updates over here, I do think that we need something that mentions like notification of something official.
Mhm.
That you know, and maybe something like, you know, a week in advance or whatever.
Hmm.
I think we need that for TSC voting. Other than that, I actually don't see anything that actually needs to be really changed here. And so this is highlighted by David, that basically the chair, whoever it is, whoever steps back the slowest, is the primary point of contact. And then everything else is kind of just sort of suggested language. The big one was the mission and scope, because that really is the one that everything else is based on, as far as that goes. So yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit of confusion in my mind about all of the suggested edits. For example, David has a lot in there, and then I have the suggested ads as well, in these two specific places. So we could talk about the process there, but the short answer is I think we're making good progress there. And Stephen, you're chasing down this kind of
Yeah.
idea. And
Yeah.
then we can go ahead and execute that when it happens. And that way we have, currently active people that are involved. And I think we make that happen. So this will actually make some things official that have been unofficial. No one elected Stephen and I as kind of like defaultish community coordinator folks, and it's mostly come down to the fact that I run the meetings and Stephen creates the quarterly reports. And so that is certainly, it might be that Stephen and I step back the slowest in some fashion in this new thing too, but with my periodic plea for anyone else who wants to be involved, there's definitely open time or open opportunity for folks that would like to be more involved in the coordination of the community. So gentle reminder that we're just volunteers here and really have no authority, as kind of how that comes along. So this will make that a little bit more official, which is probably good. And again, we have been relatively conflict free as a community. And so we haven't ever really had an issue where like voting matters, and I think that that's good. But it's probably for the health of the project good to be a little bit more official than we have been on these things. James, quarterly report's going to continue at this stage. Probably, Stephen mentioned, although they'll probably adjust slightly to take into account what really needs to happen there. But I think having a quarterly report is a good practice. And so we'll see what happens, but it's likely going to continue in some fashion. Cool. Any other conversation about the charter? I'll get in here and clean up notes because a bunch of this is just copied from old stuff. Okay. Hearing nothing. Updates on the progress we're making on killing unqualified DIDs and the other community coordinated updates. Any progress that we can share? I note that James had mentioned that DID Peer 4 was something that was added, which is part of that effort to sort of be post unqualified DIDs, even if the project didn't use them originally. Adding DID Peer 4 support as part of that transition is quite important. Any other comments or updates that folks can offer? I believe Akapai is there in the sense that it supports the right stuff and it's defaulting the right way as part of that.
I noticed that did Indy is listed here. Is the intent actually to also have this transition be transitioning from the unqualified did solve to did Indy?
No, not necessarily. So this was mostly a discussion from a previous meeting about kind of what the current state of it is. The real goal of this is that use of unqualified dids go away. So we've highlighted that did peer 4 is added, and that you stop using unqualified dids. Whether you move to sort of official did Indy dids or not is a separate issue from that. It just came up in discussion because of how related it is as a possible target for which did method to use.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So use of did ND is in no way required. It was just one of the options that you could use going forward. Since this conversation has happened, all note TDW has come a long way. And so that is also a super likely target for folks that are looking to do, although that's not quite stamped. But that's certainly a reasonable target for DIDs related to orgs and such, as part of that. So the next step here is we're in step one. Moving to step two means that we stop using unqualified DIDs and then we default to using these other ones as part of that. And so that's a step that we could have. We're a little over the deployment update here. Is anyone aware of deployed code that still can't handle DID rotation and DID peer 4? So Daniel has in the chat, minor improvement update, upcoming Akapai patch release fixes, DID exchange issues with default bifold configuration enabled qualified DIDs be used between those two projects. Excellent. So there is that is a movement on Akapai that fixes its interaction with bifold specifically, which is awesome. So given that, we will actually have there's some deployment needs for Akapai and bifold related code bases prior to stepping into step two. As soon as we enter into step two, people stop using unqualified DIDs during the adoption phase of step two, which means that if there's any currently deployed code that can't handle qualified DIDs, and by qualified DIDs I mean just regular old DIDs done properly, then we need to know that so that we don't jump to step two prematurely. So knowing the deployment state of code that's capable of handling, fully qualified DIDs is really important. The thing for discussion is when we actually begin step two, which means that people start removing support for that out of their code bases. And the target that we had set previously was the beginning of November for that target date, which is not that far away. But that's for finishing step two. But the big transition time is understanding that we're actually moving to step two, which means stuff starts getting removed. This will be the source of incompatibility issues if this is not managed carefully, in the sense that we have deployed stuff that intends to be current and is not ready yet. So I've asked this before, but I'll be clear. Please take a look around at the systems you have, and please raise concern if you have lots of deployed stuff that's incapable of beginning step two, in the sense that that unqualified DIDs go away, because that will begin to happen as soon as we begin phase two. All right. And then the same thing is true for out-of-band DID exchange. We've heard a little bit about that already, but anything specifically about using out-of-band invitations? Okay, hearing nothing. This is a similar phase transition where as soon as we begin phase two, then the QR codes presented that contain connection invitations are not going to be recognized by apps scanning them. That's where the rubber meets the road in that particular update. And so that's important to recognize there. Okay. And we've talked about, connecting with these folks to see if there's any intent to update or not, as part of that. And I haven't done any work there. DIDCOM V2 adoption. I know Akapai has now merged into main the very beginnings of DIDCOM V2 support in the sense that it will receive DIDCOM V2 messages, but then responds with an error report saying we don't understand this message, meaning that the mechanism is there, but protocol support has not been added. Is that an accurate assessment of where Akapai is for DIDCOM V2?
That's my understanding, but I don't know the details.
I think we had Daniel Bloom, and then
Yeah,
I
but
think we
we've
lost
lost them.
him.
Colton, do you know by any chance?
Repeat the question.
The
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my understanding is that Akapai is capable of receiving DIDCOM v2 messages, but then responds with the DIDCOM v2 problem report for everything at this point because no protocol support has been added. Is that accurate?
Correct. In fact, at the point where protocol handling would be done, none of that has even been coded in, and so that is the exact point in the code where the problem report is sent.
Right. So the next phase of adoption that would be adding protocol support that's capable of responding to DIDCOM v2 versions of the protocols.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. James, I was about to ask you for VCX plans for DIDCOM v2. Is that why you're unmuting?
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
We've not made significant progress here, but it's at least somewhat aware on our mind. We had a discussion recently about doing some refactoring or adjustments to our protocol message definitions. And a consideration there is trying to make sure that that's compatible with um, or at least ready for DIGCOM v2 messages as well. So we're significantly less far along as Akapai or Credo, but it's at least on top of mind. I think we have we have some pressing matters. I don't know if this is going to be happening soon for us, but I think I'd say maybe medium term. Unless someone wants to jump in and do a lot of the work that this could always happen faster as well. But based off of my current, what I can currently see, that it's not immediately happening, but is at least top of mind.
Right. Cool. It's good that you're tracking it. I totally understand resourcing issues, etc. So, totally hear that. One of the things that this will help with, the DIDCOM v2 adoption will help with, is then we can to hopefully stop working and solving issues with DIDCOM v1 that are already solved with DIDCOM v2, which is one of the benefits there. And so it's making that transition will be really powerful. So with that, any other comments on DIDCOM v2? So with that, I have other notes here, but they're mostly just things that I've copied forward, which is probably a bad habit. And I need to go kind of clean this up because we have them, of course, available in previous meetings. But it's kind of the end of what I was planning to cover today. Any topics or things that folks want to bring up in the remaining 10 minutes that we've got that for discussion in the community?
I've got one. One of the things that has come up to be a high priority at BC Gov is offline presentation, so in-person offline presentation. And one part of that is, of course, something to do with NFC and BLE and how to do all that stuff. So that's one angle. But the other angle that hasn't been discussed very much, and ever since yesterday, I've been thinking a lot about, so I plan to write something up, is what caching strategies and requirements are needed if you can't get to the ledger. So, if you're can a verifier, making sure that we're aligned on the rules where a verifier has not asked for a revocation check and you respond with a revocable credential, you should not include a revocation, and therefore you don't have to go and get revocation information from the ledger. So that's one thing that we should codify in things, and I don't quite know what protocol that or where that should go. A second thing is, though, an agent should keep its latest cached entry of every transaction, including a revocation state. And if it goes to the, if it is on offline, it should respond with the latest one it has and let the chips fall where it may in on the other side. And the verifier decide if that state is recent enough to be acceptable. That also plays into, okay, well, what can you put into the from and to on the verifier side? So we had gotten to the point where, oh, you know what, it's just easier for from and to on the acceptable range to be the same thing, but maybe we have to adjust for that. So we're going to be, in addition to, you know, the BLE and that sort of thing, we're going to start looking at documenting these strategies of what the agents have to do in order to support an offline use.
So I'll add there to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
One other thing that I think we should set in stone, which is, I believe that Indy has some sort of, I've discovered that there's transactions that are both adds and updates for things like schemas and cred defs. Pretty sure no one has ever done an update to a schema or a cred def on a ledger so that you've got two transactions that refer to the same object. But I think we ought to set in stone that we shouldn't be doing that, and that the only way to, and therefore there needs only be one access to the ledger to get a schema and a cred def, and you never have to go back and get it again.
I thought you couldn't do that without creating a new version.
Exactly. But there is a thing called an edit transaction on a cred def, and I don't think it requires a new version. I don't know, but whatever, we shouldn't do it.
I'm surprised
That
it
if you
exists,
ever-
actually.
Exactly. So was I when I saw it. It was like, what? Oh, so if you look in the default rules or the list of Indy rules, there's both an add and an edit rule. So anyway, so that just is a little hole that I can think of, but we should make it clear, don't do that. Always use a new version if you need to change things. But that allows knowing what to cache. Well, you only ever have to get a schema once. You should hold on to it and never go to the ledger again if you already have it. Same with a cred def. Same with a reg rev definition, and then on a reg rev entry on getting the state of a revocation registry, you should try to get it, but if you're offline, just use whatever you have last. So those are the
Right.
types of things I want to write up and figure out, okay, here's how to deal with them. Hands are up.
Sebastis, you're first.
Stephen, is the in-person offline being looked at also as a proximity-based interaction, or are they two different things?
In person would be a proximity, whether proof of that proximity I don't know those details, but yes, those are like the one in BC is you know, age verification for in-person entry into a bar and things like that.
Yeah, so
So that's the use case.
exactly. And are we going to look at what the ISO MDL standard has already defined as the interaction interaction or engagement protocol for sharing information in that case?
Again, as I say, those would be under the BLE and DIDCOM and BLE DIDCOM. I mean, totally, but what I'm talking about here are simply, sorry, I should say, and non-creds caching strategies. So I don't know about the transport. I don't understand that enough to have any put into that, so others can weigh into that part of it. All I was talking about was and non-creds caching strategies that would be needed on top of having some sort of way to do the transport level stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, at the same time, I think there is overlap here. There is similarity to ANAN-creds and MDLs.
Mhm.
Because there's a concept of device key also, which is similar to what ANAN-cred leverages. And then in the in-proximity protocol is quite mature and defined well by the ISO folks. And also in terms of caching, MDL defines when to go and limit itself to just the in-person and when to go to the next level of assurance by going and hitting the system of truth. So there is things to be learned, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. That will we look at it, because those protocols are already defined. I know DITCOM and MDL's specifications are different, but at least from learning the protocol and looking at its pros and cons, it may be helpful.
Does MDL have revocation outlined?
They handle it in a very different way. It's quite interesting how they do it. They have a concept of expiry, and if it's expired, you can. But the idea, if you look at how Virginia has implemented driver's license, they're doing digital transactions very different than how they're doing card transactions. Basically, what they're saying is, I'm going to issue you a driver's license every month.
Yeah, yeah, that's and that's what I mean by, so that can be done. You don't have any need to try to get to the ledger or anything else when you're offline. You've got everything you need in your phone.
Correct. But it does, sorry to interrupt you, but it does allow you to go, if you are doing a high value transaction and you are not happy with just doing the offline wallet to verifier transaction, it allows you to go hit the system of record. But because it's expensive and it means you're going to do a double.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
right?
but that's got nothing to do with the holder. That can't be done offline.
Correct.
That is only between the verifier and the issuer. The verifier goes back to the issuer and says, hey, give me the information on it. That's totally different.
Correct.
We don't have any way of doing that, and nor do we want to.
Agreed. I understand that. But yeah. I'm just saying that there are different protocols defined here, and maybe will we consider looking at it also and taking what's good there.
I think there's interest in both. Real quick, James, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that it might be wise. There might be, I don't know if there's other implications here, but with the indie edits on credefs and schemas, it might be, I would push to put that into the code perspective, not make it just a policy, but actually codify it.
Sorry, what was that again? I missed that, James. Sorry.
Yeah, when it comes to the indie edits, I would push to
Oh,
try and
yeah.
push this into the code base, is not just say we shouldn't do this rule, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Any particular ledger could actually put a rule that says that it's impossible to meet. Like, oh, it has to be signed by 12 trustees. and it's more or less impossible to get that done. That would be an easy way to put that in.
Right. Very cool. And on the concept of like transport, whether you do the ISO MDL proximity flow or the online flow, frankly, or using DIDCOM BLE, I think there's interest in both. The ISO MDL stuff is more opinionated about what you can pass. DIDCOM, of course, is more flexible. And there's been a bunch of work done by Animo a long time ago, and then I think more recently, actually, in some implementation for the in-person one, but that would be really cool to see. I added a note to everything that I added in the notes. I tried to write down what you said. I added, though, credential trust establishment as a way of indicating both the parties, meaning like which DID docs you should actually have cached, and as well as the like which assets, which would indicate both the schemas and the cred defs if you're using a non-creds for what you ought to have cached. And so using something that you need to have anyway in order to determine whether you're going to accept a credential as the basis for knowing what to cache is a really useful piece. That's why I added that note there. This would be cool discussions, and I think would be really interesting to cover both sort of progress and discuss various topics of this in the future, because I think this is a powerful thing to have as part of Aries, and we've long theorized it, and making it real is very exciting to me. So we're over time. Thanks, folks. Appreciate you being here. Hope your week is a great one. And please, of course, reach out if you have any topics that you would like to be on the list or things discussed, and we will get that on the agenda. Thanks, folks, and we will talk to you later.
Thank you.